Obviously I've done a lot of writing and analysis on drafting quarterbacks late in fantasy football throughout my career. And so I'm going to go with the QB1 in this year's fantasy football draft, Josh Allen. And I have him as my QB1. So I think a lot of people, and this is sort of like the Dalton Schultz thing where like, I'm like against Dalton Schultz a little bit at his ADP. It seems like it's a little bit too high, but I still have Dalton Schultz as my tight end 6, which is exactly where, he's being drafted. You have to look beyond the position. Whenever you're looking at this stuff, there's an opportunity cost involved, right? I just see a very clear gap in ADP whenever you're analyzing ADP between Josh Allen and a lot of these other quarterbacks that are up top, whether it's a Kyler Murray, whether it's a Jalen Hurts, when realistically, I don't think that that's necessary or it's as necessary as what we're seeing. Allen right now is 23rd on Fantasy Pros aggregate ADP. I know he goes a little bit later if you're doing a best ball draft and such, but generally speaking, if you're talking like home leagues or something, he's probably going to be a second round pick in a lot of home leagues this year. Whereas a guy like Kyler, guy like Jalen Hurts, you're getting end of the 5th round, past the 5th round for those guys oftentimes. And really, it seems like, that's only 3 rounds. But the opportunity cost involved there is absolutely massive. People are going to be taking Josh Allen over like very, very legitimate potential bell cow backs like Leonard Fournette, Saquon Barkley. When those the first 2.5 rounds of fantasy drafts have historically brought way, way better hit rates at both running back and wide receiver than what you're going to see, where those other quarterbacks are being drafted, like a Kyler Murray or a Jalen Hurts. Just as an example, back half round 2 running backs in 12-team leagues have given us 14 PPR points per game at a 70% rate since 2011. That number is 10% in the back half of the 5th round. So just to give you an idea of what the opportunity cost is at running back between where Kyler is going or where Jalen Hurts is going versus where Josh Allen's going. And there's other, you could talk about Lamar, you could throw him in there. There's a lot of quarterbacks that are sort of going in that other range. And then obviously, you can get wide receivers in that second round too. Another place where they have pretty good hit rates. The back half of second round wide receivers have scored 14 plus PPR points per game at a 76% rate. That number drops to about 46% when you get to the back half of the 5th. So that just sort of illustrates the running back dead zone. The running backs are a lot worse in the 5th round than wide receivers are. But even still, you're seeing a decline, a pretty big decline in value there, wide receiver and running back, when you're looking at the back half of the 2nd to the back half of the 5th to the front half of the 6th, etc. It's fine. I think to get an elite quarterback in fantasy right now, it's fine if you want to go that route. I talk a lot about the predictability of the position. It's a lot different than what we've seen or what we did see back in 2015, 2016, where you could literally throw a dart at top 18 quarterbacks and one of those quarterbacks might end up as a QB1. We just don't see that anymore. The last couple of years, we've seen really, really strong predictability at the position among top 12 quarterbacks. A lot of that has to do with the fact that people are finally catching on to something that Rich wrote about, that you wrote about back in 2013 on Number Fire about mobile quarterbacks in the Konami code. People are finally catching on to all of that. But regardless, I can understand buying into that predictability a little bit because you want to have that stability at the position where it's a lot harder to stream now. It's a lot harder to replace that position. But, when you look at projections, Josh Allen is the QB1 in my projections. Josh Allen is my QB1 overall. But at the same time, I don't think it would shock anyone if Kyler Murray or Jalen Hurts finish above him. Whereas if you sort of compare and contrast some of the 5th round wide receivers or running backs versus those 2nd round guys, it's a little less clear and it's not as obvious to see that sort of, it's more clear as to who you'd be drafting a running back and wide receiver in the 2nd round versus the 5th. So this is really just a cost play. I like Josh Allen, like I said, as a QB1, but I think there's enough reason, to not go that route from a game theory perspective and just opt to go with like a Jalen Hurts or a Kyler Murray.
Yeah, I mean, being the first gamer in your league to draft a quarterback is something that I think you and I will never subscribe to. And then also when you just look at it from a top-down stance, I mean, the last time the QB1 in ADP was the actual QB1 overall scoring was Aaron Rodgers in 2011. The last time the QB1 was even above QB4 in overall season scoring hasn't happened in 9 seasons. So there's the margin for error missing on a quarterback, factoring in opportunity cost is just so tough. And even you look at last year, how great Josh Allen was. He had over 400 fantasy points. Justin Herbert still produced 95% of what Josh Allen put out. Tom Brady still produced 93%. It's just a low leverage point position, and you have to be there early, and you have to need so much to go right based on the opportunity cost. It's just tough. But Josh Allen, super fun to watch play football. Definitely one of our favorite guys to watch. But yeah, you just can't be the first person in your league to take a quarterback.
That's another thing I just want to add. That's another thing that I think goes overlooked so often when you're drafting quarterbacks is that if you're the first team to draft a quarterback, you better hope and pray that someone else in your league is drafting a quarterback very quickly after. Otherwise, you really, really devalue that position, because hypothetically, if you get Josh Allen in the second round or even the third round, and someone waits in that QB2 like Justin Herbert or Kyler, what if they go in the 8th or 9th round? Then all of a sudden you really screwed up in getting that value. Whereas if you're able to get like the QB4, QB5 or something like that within that elite tier, you generally know the price point for quarterbacks at that point. So it's a lot easier to buy into them.